School is so boring. A teacher in front of a classroom with 20 plus students cannot possibly provide an individualized experience to every single student. Well, you have to have 45, to 60 minutes for each of the core subjects. If you actually went in as an observer and measured the amount of information that's actually being passed through to a student during that 50 minutes, it is so minimal.
When do you think the traditional education system is going to catch up?
This is what is so exciting and really has the potential to disrupt this industry, which hasn't been disrupted in a couple hundred years, is that
Mackenzie Price is a dynamic educator and entrepreneur who's revolutionizing the way we learn by making education faster, smarter, and more efficient.
She's helping students and professionals alike master new skills in record time.
I believe that in the next 5 years, every kid is going to have access to, an iPad basically that gives them the ability to learn everything they need to know from an academic perspective.
Even kindergartners working on computers and iPads. Some of the parents probably also saying, wow, this is too much, no?
The way that screen time is being done, right? Our education is being delivered on a computer, but this is not doom scrolling TikTok. The other big skill that I think we cannot forget is we are teaching them a critical skill, which is we now have the ability to do that.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. Here are your hosts, Anayet Chowdhury and Vlad Suleiman.
Mackenzie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, this is super exciting. It's funny because we are an ed tech company, and we rarely have guests, right, Vlad, on the topic in the industry of education.
I think you are the first one.
Which is really and we're like 150 episodes in, so it's kind of bizarre. But welcome to the show.
You know why that is, though, is because education has been so boring. Just like it bores our students, it's kind of a boring subject to talk about. And I think when we finally have an opportunity to really revolutionize education, it gets a lot more exciting. So you'll find plenty of energy from me because I'm obsessed with it.
Awesome. And you make a very valid point. So I kind of want to first start off with I want to take you back, and I want to understand the why behind all of this. So I understand you founded 2-Hour Learning. Let us know how you got to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking you way back, I was one of those kids who grew up being really good at school. I was good at getting A's. I knew how to play the school game, but I also was a kid who did not enjoy school. Like I would walk around to my teachers at school and be like, wait, you actually choose to work here? This is what you want to spend your time with? Because I could not wait until I was finished with school. And I think there were several reasons for that. One, I found it pretty boring. I also never saw the connection between what I was learning and how I would apply that. So I was always that kid who would raise my hand and be like, sorry, why do I need to know this? I don't think I'm going to do anything sort of job that's going to have to know this. So why do I have to do that? But for whatever reason, I was one of those kids who did want to do well. And I really enjoyed also being in the group with the other smart kids. And so, that's kind of what happened. I'll never forget though, my last final at Stanford University, I walked out and I literally tipped my head and said, I'm done. I'm never setting foot in school again. So that's kind of how I was. I then had 2 daughters. And when it was time for my girls to go off to school, my husband and I said, hey, let's send them down the street to our local public school. Both my husband and I had been public school educated and, had been successful in the system. So we did that. But pretty quickly, I found myself getting frustrated with the lack of ability for the school to kind of personalize the experience for each of my girls. And that really came to a head about halfway through my oldest daughter's second grade year. She and I were having a conversation and she said to me, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. And I said, what do you mean? You love school. And she looked at me and she said, school is so boring. And I just had this moment of oh my gosh, they have taken a kid who's tailor-made to be excited and energized and curious, and they've wiped away that passion. And I was like, this is me all over again. And I don't want to have her sit for the next 10 years of her, uh, elementary and high school career being bored. And I knew something had to change. And for me, it wasn't about a public school versus a private school. It was really the model of education. A teacher in front of a classroom with 20 plus students cannot possibly provide an individualized experience to every single student. And a time-based system where all kids in a grade run through material at the same time and pace just doesn't work well. And the other thing I saw is even in second grade, my daughter was saddled with homework that was like really dumb homework on top of that. And so I looked around my community and I didn't see anything else that really matched what I was going for. And so I decided to take matters in my own hand, and I started my first school. And that was in the fall of 2014. We started in a house with 16 kids and,
Wow.
one guide. And we knew back then that we could provide kids with a personalized one-to-one based education with adaptive apps. We knew that we could do that. We knew we didn't have to have a teacher in front of the classroom, lecture style, time-based curriculum. And then the other thing we knew kind of early on was that it doesn't take all day to learn academics. We could spend basically the morning doing core academic subjects, and then the afternoon we were really focused on life skills development. And the two life skills that we really cared about were entrepreneurship and public speaking. Because I feel like if you have a good sense of entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and you're a great public speaker, like a lot of things open up on there. So fast forward 10 years, I've now got about 8 different schools in Texas and in Florida that are all based off of this 2-hour learning model, which means in the morning we're using adaptive apps. And what then I've built is an AI tutor that makes sure students are learning efficiently at the right pace and at the right level through those apps. So as a result, our students are placing in the top 2% in the country. In fact, I'd argue there's not another school delivering the kind of academic results that we're getting. And then in the afternoon, we do life skills. And I fundamentally believe the key to creating a great experience for kids, they need to love school. If you don't have a motivated learner who loves school, then everything else kind of goes away. And that's been what's really exciting for me to work on. And I will say my second grade daughter back in the day is now a freshman in college. She graduated from the first school that I founded last spring. And it's been a really fun, road to walk down. I often tease that she was my little guinea pig. And when she got into her dream college, she looked at me and she said, "Okay, Mom, I can finally look at you and say, thanks for starting this school." It all worked out well.
That's amazing. No, that truly is amazing. So my daughter, Vlad has 2 daughters. I have a daughter as well, but she's
Oh,
1
wow.
years
Girl
old.
power all the way, huh?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
his brother, who is our last co-founder, has 3 girls. So we're just
Oh,
all, we have 6 girls between us. Hopefully,
Goes
a seventh
around the
seventh
world,
girl
huh?
coming soon, right, Vlad?
Oh yeah,
wow.
So I often actually think about this because I was listening to your story and I can really resonate. This is actually a fear that's creeping up into me, which is my daughter hopefully will be ready to go to school, and more than likely she will probably be advanced for her class, just because
Hmm.
given the nature of my field, given the amount of resources and effort that I'm going to personally put behind her. You make a very good point. Putting her in the traditional education system creates a very boring environment for her, especially if she cannot be stimulated, right? If she's finished with the materials, or she already knows the material. So it really poses an important question. Now, does this apply for excelling students, or does it apply for students all across the board? So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, it,
I'm so glad you asked that question, because you did perfectly describe. And first of all, I will say, parents that are listening out there, generally, if they have a parent like you who is at all kind of plugged into, like, you know, engaged parenting, a lot of kids do come in advanced, right? They do understand what's going on, and those kids are bored. I'm actually doing this podcast from our gifted and talented school called GT School. But here's the thing. Think about all those kids who maybe don't understand the material after the teacher has explained it. And guess what? That train has left the station. If you don't understand it after that concept has been explained, you're totally lost. And that is becoming a much, much larger percentage of the population, right? We've
mm,
seen horrendous academic results, in the United States when it comes to, how kids are learning. So that teacher in front of the classroom model, it fits such a tiny, tiny fraction of the students that are sitting in a classroom, right? And that's why, I think teachers are heroes, right? They are given an impossible job. They are supposed to, teach 20 plus kids, right, in this classroom model where they're supposed to keep the advanced ones excited. They're supposed to help the kids who are behind, and they're supposed to teach kind of in the middle. And it's very hard to do that, right? And so you guys are curriculum people, right? You understand, like, hey, you got to teach the sixth grade math level textbook to a bunch of sixth graders, no matter where they're at academically.
Right.
So here's the beauty of AI. And this is what is so exciting and really has a potential to disrupt this industry, which hasn't been disrupted in a couple hundred years, is that we now have the ability to provide a one-to-one mastery-based tutor for every single child, no matter where they're at. And that is what's so exciting, because here's our biggest untapped resource in the world. It's not nuclear energy. It's not solar energy, certainly not wind energy, right? It's human potential. And we have to get people educated. And that's what's really cool about this model of education, is we now have the ability to do that.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning educational publisher serving over 1 million students nationwide. If you're a kindergarten to 8th grade teacher or principal, be sure to check out our supplementary workbooks to get your students ready for standardized state testing. We cover all subjects from kindergarten to 8th grade. Use the coupon code AVENUE for a 25% discount off of all purchase orders. Visit us today at argoprep.com/store. When do you think the traditional education system is going to catch up? When do you think that we will truly disrupt? No, because you're right. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been gifted. The consumers have been gifted, or maybe a curse. Who knows? We'll find out later down the road. But with these large language modules, right? Anthropic has. This is a race, right? You have ChatGPT, you have Claude, the things that it can do, and you can build personalized one-on-one, the perfect tutor that can take you, whether you're an advanced student, whether you are at the beginning, whether if you don't even know how to speak English yet, it can really help you. But when do you predict, or when do you think we're going to catch on? Can we really catch on? Is the teachers union going to allow
an
it?
open-ended question, and you don't have to answer this question even. When? This is
Yeah,
very
go
hard
ahead.
to
So when is it
pick
going to
up.
happen? Here's my vision. I believe that in the next 5 years, every kid is going to have access to, an iPad, basically, that gives them the ability to learn everything they need to know from an academic perspective, right there at their fingertips. I also believe the cost of providing that education is going to go down drastically in the next 5 years, which is going to help make this accessible for many, many students. The big question is going to be, how do we get the existing systems to catch on? Because I will tell you, what it requires is a complete reimagination of the day at school, right? And one thing I know for certain, in 10 years of experience on this, even though our kids are able to crush academics in only 2 hours a day, parents don't want their kids to go home after 2 hours, right? They want to have this bundled day of, like, we want the socialization, we want the daycare, the babysitting, we want that. And so the biggest thing that we have to figure out is, what are the afternoons going to look like? And that's the key, is life skills. We've got to teach life skills, and that's everything from leadership and teamwork, communication, grit, financial literacy and entrepreneurship, all of those things, which, by the way, the majority of adults believe those skills are even more important than academic skills. And when you ask about, like, the traditional system and the teachers unions, here's the thing. One of the, when we think about AI coming in and teaching kids, the first thought that people get is, oh my gosh, it's going to take away the teacher's job. And what I believe instead is, this is going to transform the role of the teacher in the classroom to do what only they can do well, which is impact and positively motivate and connect with their students. Not have to create lesson plans, grade papers, do all these kind of, like, time-consuming kind of bureaucratic things that they can do, that an AI tutor can do better, right, to provide this. And let's allow instead the adults in the classroom to leverage artificial intelligence to provide this great academic experience, and then they can focus on that human intelligence connection point, which will never ever be replaced by AI, or you know we should hope it isn't, right?
I
And
agree.
so I think that you're right, the teachers unions are certainly going to be a challenge, but we think about these systems, and when they're systems together, they become beasts. But when you talk to individual teachers, they got into this field to make a difference in children's lives, right? These teachers they're underpaid, they're overworked, and they're underappreciated. Again, because they've been given this impossible task. But if we can provide an environment where instead we can say to these teachers, okay, you come in and you can focus on motivational connecting with each student, getting to know what's going on for them, that when they're challenged, what do they say to themselves, and how can we give them more positive talk? How can we incorporate growth mindset strategies to help them? How can we connect what their interests are with what they're learning? That is a way more satisfying and exciting kind of role to give. The other thing is, I think there's got to be some benefit. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is showing our results, being very transparent with results. Because if you look at the way that they've tried to fix education in the last 30 years, it's always comes down to, well, we need more funding. Guess what? Schools are more funded than they've ever been. A lot of
Yep.
that funding has gone towards administrative bloat. It doesn't
Yep.
actually arrive in the classroom where it belongs. The Los Angeles Unified School District, as of like 2 years ago, they were about $36,000 per student was their budget,
Wow.
right? $36,000. That is
That's
more than
crazy,
a lot of
actually.
private schools, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy how much that is, and they're not doing it. But it's always been about, let's lower the student teacher ratio, right? And here's the thing, we're never going to get that ratio lowered to the point where we're giving that one-to-one tutoring, especially when we see teachers leaving the field in droves as opposed to entering it. And those people that are entering this workforce are less qualified than they've ever been, right? So it's not just about more teacher training and more of that. We really need to fundamentally say it's time to fix this system and do something different. I will tell you what I'm doing is I'm working desperately on just building my own distribution system. And as we start seeing that families have more choices, you don't just have to put your kid on the local public school bus, that takes them to the nearest school. You can look at other changes. And that's one thing that I think is super exciting about this education environment we're in, is parents are realizing like, wow, we do have choices to find what works well for my child.
The typical day in your school, how does it look like? It's 2 hours of academics with AI one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
So
So
kids sitting with a computer and they have individualized learning. And then
yeah.
how many
So
hours of other activities?
Yeah, so our students are in school for a full day. They show up at about 8:45 at the elementary level. We always start our day with what we call a limitless launch, which is when we get the kids together, we get them really clear on like, what are they excited to accomplish for the day? One of the things that has worked really well in our model, and artificial intelligence has given us this ability, is our kids all the way down to kindergarten are very clear on what the goals are that they have for the day. Like, my goal today is I'm going to finish 2 units of this math, and I'm going to do this many reading sections. Versus when you think about a typical school, kids come in, they sit down, and they're passive. They're told to just sit still and see what you got to do. So we get kids connected with what are their goals, and we always introduce some sort of growth mindset strategy so that they can be clear when you come upon a challenge, when something is hard. What are you going to say? What are you going to implement? What resource are you going to use in order to get through that challenge? Then our students sit down for their 2-hour learning block. And basically, this is like the Pomodoro technique. It's 25 minutes of focused work, and then you get a break. And that's been shown to work really well. For our younger students, it's actually less time than that, right? They're in shorter bursts, but they're getting all of their core subjects at exactly that level and exactly the pace they need. And the other thing that's really cool about this, when we think about individualized learning, is let's say a student comes on to a concept in math, for example, that they don't understand. Our AI tutor is able to look and understand, does this student just need to revisit this lesson? Maybe they need to read this explanation, or they need to watch this video, or do they need to go and revisit a concept from a week, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years ago in order to make this understanding happen. And that's what's cool about mastery-based learning is it's constantly able to assess versus in a typical school where as soon as you take that test, I used to say this, my ears had a complete one-way tunnel, information in and it was out as soon as I was finished with the test, right? And it kind of went from there. And so that's what is really cool. And one of the fundamental beliefs we have is that competence leads to confidence. When a student finally feels like, hey, I understand this, I understand math, it makes them like math better. Like nobody likes doing something that they don't understand. And often that just gets harder and harder as kids go through school and get into, tougher subjects. Then we've got lunch break and then we move into our life skills workshops in the afternoon. And these are super engaging, project-based group activities, right? And this is where the adults in our building, we don't call them teachers, we call them guides. They're working with the students to teach these different life skills through really fun activities. And, at 3:30 at the end of the school day, these kids come home and instead of getting into their parents' car and the parents saying, what'd you do at school today? How was school today? Fine. They're like, oh my gosh, I was working on this. We were building a business. We were doing a triathlon training program. We were working on things. I got this many of my academic goals completed and here's where I struggled. And that to me is the thing that drives everything is seeing kids with a fire in their bellies who are excited about what they do. And in fact, our first commitment that we have at our schools is that kids will love school, right? We surveyed that. Do you love school? Yes or no? And would you rather go to school or go on vacation? 60+% of our students would rather go to school than go on vacation. And that's what we want to have. We want schools that are filled with kids that are just excited.
I'm sure you got a lot of pushback from traditional circles, educational circles. I mean,
Well,
even kindergartners working on computers and iPads. I mean, some of the parents probably also saying, "Wow, this is too much," no?
Yeah, one of the things that we often hear is when people first hear about this model, they jump to initial conclusions like screen time is bad, screen time is terrible, right? And
Right.
I agree. I think screen time is bad. I think I think actually screen time can be bad no matter what your age. But then we have to look at the way that screen time is being done, right? And what we're doing is our education is being delivered on a computer, but this is not doom scrolling TikTok. This is not just zoning out watching YouTube videos, right? This is getting this very engaged one-to-one tutoring system. Think about how Plato and Aristotle, learned. They had an expert tutor that was going with them at their pace, that was matching their interests with the lesson that they were doing. And that's what this has to do. So that 7-year-old boy, that little boy who doesn't really like to read, but that his favorite movie is Star Wars and his friends from his baseball team are his best friends and he loves eating Italian food. And then suddenly you have a story that he's reading that's exactly the right lexile level for his reading level, right? And suddenly he and his friends from his baseball team are out, on the Death Star, fighting against the dark side in a Star Wars type movie, choose your own adventure, story. That kid suddenly is way more engaged looking at a screen than he would be sitting in a class with a teacher in front of the classroom with kids near him that they're not really talking, interacting, right? And doing that.
100%.
And so when you walk into one of our schools, you'll see kids all sitting near each other doing that, but they are zoned in on their learning experience. And they're only doing it for 2 hours a day, as opposed to spending all day learning how to generally sit still, be quiet, raise your hand when you want to speak, and really listen. The other big skill that I think we cannot forget is we are teaching them a critical skill, which is learning how to learn, right? They are not passive passengers just waiting for a teacher to feed them information at the pace that the class goes. They are able to go as fast as they are capable of. And that's why our students across the board, whether they come into us in the 95th percentile or the 10th percentile, are able to learn twice as fast. And especially when we think about those kids who are far behind, that's where you see incredible magic and progress happen on education.
How did you manage this personalization before AI came? Because AI is just recent thing, like 1 or 2 years. How about
Well, I
before?
mean, AI, as we all know it, with the formation of ChatGPT, is just 1 or 2 years old. AI has actually been around since the 80s, right? And adaptive apps, which were out in 2014, they've been around for quite a long time, right? Have been out on that, and to some degree, they do utilize a little bit of an artificial intelligence in that they're able to see, okay, this student knows this, therefore we can go to this, or this student needs more lessons or whatever. What hasn't been possible, and really is what we've kind of created in the last year or so, year and a half, is the AI tutor that makes sure that a student is going through the apps at the right pace and the level. Because, for example, a lot of times students have used apps, and they might go on an app and they can do things like topic shop. Okay, I want to learn this, but I don't want to learn this, right? Or as soon as I'm learning something, a concept, as soon as it starts getting harder, I'm going to skip out and stop doing that. Or instead of reading the explanation, I'm going to just guess, right? I'm just going to pick D and hope that I got the right answer. And that's the beauty of the AI tutor that we've created, is it's really curating the experience for a student to make sure that they are learning efficiently and that they are focused on their learning. And that's kind of been the big key insight that's really helped, and the reason that we've been able to deliver such phenomenal results, compared to maybe a parent who says, well, my kid's done IXL at home. We're not seeing incredible learning rates. The other thing I will tell you is I really believe it's got to be a very purist experience where a kid uses app learning and an AI tutor, as opposed to combining that with a time-based teacher in front of the classroom model, which a lot of schools have done, right? They'll say, well, we're in math class, but twice a week for 15 minutes at a time, our kids will use Khan Academy. That only further exacerbates the issue, because a lot of times those kids are just thrown into some lesson that may or may not be aligned with where they're at, and they're maybe not paying attention. And let's say even they are using it well, they still end up going back to that time-based system. So I spend a lot of time on my Future of Education podcasts and on my social media at Future of Education, helping to just raise awareness to parents, to administrators, to teachers, and to kids, that there is this other way of learning that's coming out, and that's exciting. So you're right, screen time is something that initially people will go, oh, that seems bad, because we've all been trained to say it's bad. Then they go, okay, this is not Zoom school from COVID days, and this is not again, just mindlessly playing a video game or something like that. This is really engaged learning. I think well, I'm trying to think. Oh, this is another thing we get early on, is people will say, well, what about socialization, right? If a kid is learning on their computer, how are they socializing? And again, I'd give a couple of things to that, which is how much socialization is really happening during a traditional school class time, right? Especially as kids get older, they get a few minutes to pass from class to class or whatever they're doing. They're generally being quiet. What we're able to do is provide this shorter period of time for academics as opposed to all day. And then our afternoons are supercharged with socialization, and not just socialization, by chance. We do things like we had a workshop for our fifth and sixth graders last year called How to Be a Spy, right? It was all these fun things around how to be a spy. But what we were actually teaching were things like how to read body language, how to make eye contact, how to initiate conversations with somebody and keep a conversation going, how to pick up on cues for something. And those are the kinds of skills that are so phenomenal to kind of teach. At our middle school, one of the things we focus on is we do a workshop around how to navigate the high school cafeteria. So think about, did you guys see the movie Mean Girls?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You saw Mean Girls. You think about a typical high school, navigating the social world of high school is really
Right.
hardcore. We literally have workshops with our middle schoolers where they're learning about things like, here's how to be interesting, and here's how to be interested in other people. Here's how to make conversation. So our students will do literally simulations of high school cafeteria with each other. Then they'll go to the older high school cafeteria at our school, and then their test to pass is they got to go to another school's cafeteria and make friends. So a lot of what we're trying to do when we think about socialization is really give kids the tools that they need to be successful. in a healthy way, not in what often can be a toxic way in traditional worlds.
For those who are listening right now and they say, hey, Mackenzie, this sounds amazing, but well, for a myriad of reasons, my child is still in public school. What are some actionable advice that you can give the parents that kind of that can go ahead and implement this personalized learning? Are there any tools that you'd recommend? Are there any apps? Are there any strategies that you could recommend?
Yeah,
Because obviously, whether it's financial restrictions, there could be 1,000 things, but
of
they say,
course.
hey, same thing here. I love what you're saying. I think financial literacy is so important. I think that we need this AI tutor. Sounds amazing. How do I get started as a parent? I don't know much.
Yeah. Well, let me give you at a very, very basic level something that every single person who's listening could go home and do today with their kid. You can go into ChatGPT and say, you know, I'm working with my X year old child, right? Who I want to help them foster a love of reading. Here's their interests. What are some books that you would recommend, or could you write a story that would be interesting? And take that story and then sit around your kitchen table, at dinner that night and say, hey, let's all create characters that we want to engage in, and let's create a family choose your own adventure story, and let's read that together. Those are things you can do. You can do ideas for businesses. I think doing a business is such an exciting way for a kid to get connected with financial literacy skills, with math skills, all of that stuff. And it can be simple. It might be, plastic jewelry business. It could be your lemonade stand. It could be something a little bit more creative, that you sit down with your kid and do. There's great apps at all ages that help kids kind of develop something that they're interested in. So if you have a child at home who loves science and is maybe feeling bored, there's great activities that kids can do through apps. Now, I will tell you, here's the one thing, especially as kids get older. Kids don't really want to go do more school after school, right? So when you have like, okay, I went and did school and then I've got homework and then I'm going to go do some app-based learning or something like that, I don't think that's as exciting. But I think there's a lot of AI tools where if you help a kid figure out what is that thing they're interested in, like, gosh, I love the idea of making a movie. There's amazing tools out there for kids who can say, hey, here's how you can go create your own movie, right? Or create your own fashion line, or use your interest in art to get online and do that. And one of the things I always tell adults, especially if they're not super familiar with AI, just get online and start trying out some different apps, right? Things they do. One of the things that I love to do at our schools, and I did this at home with my kids, because I think public speaking is such a valuable skill. And it's something people are terrified of, public speaking, right? They hate public speaking, but there are ways at home that you can put on, shows where it's like, hey, let's each do a speech around something. Let's do an improv conversation. Let's do here's a great debate that of course is very timely considering this podcast is being recorded on National Election Day. One of the skills that we teach our students is the ability to argue both sides, right? Both sides of an argument. So one of the things that we do with our students, and families could do this at home, is let's say you've got a kid who's trying to negotiate a later bedtime, right? Instead of going to bed at 8, I think I should go to bed at 9:30. Great. Give me your pitch, put together a pitch, put together your plan and your speech around why you believe you should have a 9:30 bedtime. And watch those kids do that. And of course, they'll be fantastic at all the great reasons that this makes sense. Then say to them, okay, now I want you to put the pitch against that thing. And I want to see if you can put as much energy and engagement into the reasons that you shouldn't, have a later bedtime. And we do this at our schools. We use AI to analyze if the kids have put the same level of energy, attention, and strength of argument into the other side. It's a great skill that, by the way, a lot of adults could be using, right? It would be a really, really good skill for adults to use. But there's ways that just in the home, you can have kids kind of express interest and figure out things that they like to do. That's the other big thing. We talk about how I'm using artificial intelligence when it comes to academics, but the life skills development and the big kind of practical application, find that intersection between what kids love and what they're good at, and then help them explore ways to go after that, right? What can they do? I just had a woman reach out to me on social media yesterday that said, I have a freshman in high school. He's an F student. He's failing out of school. He's not happy. He's miserable, but I can't leave the school. I don't have another option. I don't have financial ability to go to a different school. He's on that. What do I do for him? And I think about that. That breaks my heart, right? To think there's a 14-year-old kid who's already an F student, probably has very low self-confidence, but I guarantee you that kid's got something, some interest that he has. And it may be even something like, he wants to play Fortnite all day, right? Figure out, okay, let's take that interest in Fortnite and figure out what is something you could do. Maybe could you host a neighborhood tournament of Fortnite that you then learn how to plan an event, how to get people together, how to create like an entry fee and then a prize, and see if that gets that kid's excitement going. Because the exact, like, that fire that I was really sad when I saw my second grade daughter was losing, that's what we want to keep going in our kids, right? And so for you guys who have little kids right now, you see that fire every day, right? They're curious, they're excited, they're interested. And that's the key, is let's figure out how to keep that fire going. Or if it's been extinguished, find that interest that a kid has. And you know what? You can even use something like ChatGPT to say, here's the one thing my kid loves or is kind of interested in. What are some ways that I can help encourage them to go out? And have that brainstorm for you if you can't think of ideas yourself.
Now, you mentioned that one of the important skills to teach the kids is to teach them to love to learn. What do you think is the second most important skill?
I think learning to learn is a super important skill because it creates a self-driven student that realizes I have the ability for any interest that I have. I don't have to sit and wait for someone to tell me more about it. I can go find that out. I think that's an important one. Here's another one that I think is really important that I think a lot of parents in today's age are not interested in teaching their kids: the ability to learn about failure. Right? Learn to fail, because when you fail, there's so much incredible learning that comes from failing. One, it shows that you've tried something that maybe you weren't perfect at. And I will tell you, for me, I was one of those kids who wanted to always get straight A's. So I would steer clear of any place where I might fail, because that could actually say like, oh, wow, she's not actually good at that. And that is a travesty, right? So instead, what we want to encourage our kids to do is like, hey, take on that challenge that seems hard. And then when you fail, which on any really great, ambitious endeavor, you're going to have failure. What can we learn from that? And what can we do differently? And how can we help? And a lot of helicopter parents, right, are so quick to say, oh my gosh, no stress, no failure, nothing that makes my kid feel bad about themselves. Let's not do that. I think that is a hugely important skill. And I'm sure you guys know, you're entrepreneurs, you are business owners, you're podcasters. You probably fail all the time, right?
Absolutely.
And those failures lead to bigger and better things. I cannot tell you how many nights and days I spent stressed out about figuring out, where were we going to have school? How was I going to get that next building? How was I going to find more families to come in? All kinds of things that happen. And yet, it gets kids kind of excited, right? Instead of looking at failure as bad, let's look at it as good. And I think if you think about students who are not doing well in school, let's help those students understand, like, okay, you're not doing great in school, and maybe we don't have the ability to fix that, but let's go figure out what we can learn from this and what might get you excited. And when we connect kids with that, they feel a sense of purpose, right? You have to have a sense of ownership in order to kind of do anything. And that's what's important. Give kids a sense of ownership.
I don't know why traditional school models don't implement these core life skills as like a math class, like a science class. You have to take these classes every single year, and you have to pass. There should be a regents or a state exam based on that, like entrepreneurship and financial literacy. Learning. These are all things that relate to real life.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you why they don't. They don't have time, right? There's only so much time in the day that they have. And the way they've set it up right now is they're like, well, you have to have 45, to 60 minutes for each of the core subjects. And when you get math and science and reading and language and, an elective or two, pretty soon that's your whole day, right? But if you think about that, and, if you actually went in as an observer and measured the amount of information that's actually being passed through to a student during that 50 minutes, it is so minimal, right? And that's one of the reasons that we see our students literally being able to go through grades worth of material in months, sometimes even weeks, is
Oh, I
because
believe it.
there really isn't that much time. It's so inefficient. And I will say, my daughter, my freshman in college, she's going to great school. She's loving her experience, but she did call me up about a week into school and she said, Mom, these lectures are so inefficient. Like, I spent 50 minutes in my econ class to absorb about 5 minutes worth of information that could have been delivered via an email, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing
Yeah.
with this, right? And I will tell you, I don't have the energy to take on higher education right now. I'm focused on K through 12, but I think that's the big thing is what can we do? And I will tell you, like, if you waved a magic wand and I got to go become the Secretary of Education for the United States, I'll tell you the thing that I would do if I could go into public schools. I would probably take the model that we have with one of our schools called Sports Academy. And I would say, let's do 2-hour learning in the morning. Let's use an AI tutor to deliver this one-to-one academic plan. And then in the afternoon, let's go do sports, right? Let's just go out and be physical and play and be outside. And public schools, they already have the facilities, right? They have the fields, they have the gyms, they have the equipment. You could do this at the kindergarten through 6th grade level. This means like capture the flag and tag and just general stuff, which, by the way, sports is a great way to learn life skills,
Yeah.
right? You learn about teamwork and leadership and giving and receiving feedback and dealing with failure. You could do that. At the older levels, you could take those kids who are starting to say, okay, I know I want to go be a basketball player, I want to play volleyball or whatever. They could have more time in the afternoon to focus on, getting those skills done. And let's say not every kid likes sports. I was actually one of those kids who wasn't super sporty. How about you do a performing arts track in the afternoon, right? And it's, let's go do theater and plays and write poetry and do books, right? It'd be an easy way to go ahead and say, here's what we're going to do in the afternoon, and what we do. And then all of those adults who are currently spending all day creating their lesson plans and teaching and do that, what they could do instead is focus on, hey, let's go crush all these performing arts and these sports activities and teach life skills this way. And then let's motivate students to unlock those afternoons by doing well in their academics. That's another key part of our model, is that kids get their valuable resource of time back by doing well on their goals.
Mackenzie, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I look forward to actually catching up with you in a couple, maybe 2 years in, to see where you're at. It'll be really interesting, and we can talk about the state of traditional schooling then. For our viewers or for our listeners, can you please let them know where they can find you, a little bit more about your schools or any kind of other information you want to share with us?
Absolutely. The best place to get more information and learn about the movement that we're creating is on Future of Education, on Instagram or on YouTube. Future of Education. I also have a podcast called Future of Education, where we're talking about these types of subjects. And then 2-hour learning, the number 2hourlearning.com, is a place that you can go to learn about the schools that we're opening up across the country. If you want to start a school, we have the ability to do that and provide you with that, the resources and information that you would need to go and start a school. And then we're also launching our homeschool program. So if you are a family that is interested in this other way of learning, and maybe you don't have the ability to, go to an in-person school that does this, and you want to do the homeschooling. Here's the thing about homeschooling that's really interesting. Homeschoolers have known for a long time that it doesn't take all day to learn academics. The challenge with homeschooling is that you need someone who's going to be the teacher, right? And that's one of the reasons I didn't homeschool my kids, was because I was that kid who hated school. I was like,
Right.
teacher, why are you working in this building? So I certainly wasn't going to become a teacher, even to my own 2 kids. But what we've enabled with this 2-hour learning is that families who maybe would have liked the idea of homeschooling but didn't want to take on the teaching part are now able to do that. So those are all kind of the ways. Gosh, I have been talking a lot, you guys. You feel free to edit me, because I have just been like,
No,
blah, blah,
no.
blah.
That's good.
That is good. Well, Mackenzie, no, we'll go ahead and edit that part out, certainly. And I was going to actually ask you one thing, but that was not for the podcast. So, Mackenzie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Just, I think, showing kind of inspirational things that are happening out there. It's fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.